Welcome to Crumbs of Truth, where we want to go back over our Sons of God trilogy, I suppose it's going to be, where we look at, first we looked at the title, Sons of God. What does that mean? What does Son of God mean? What does Son of Man mean? Where now we're going to look at demon possession and whether or not possession was the culprit for the Nephilim. And then lastly, in the next part, obviously, because this is a trilogy, we're going to go in depth on the actual theory that we believe, which is the angels themselves, well, the fallen angels specifically, being the ones who came to women and had the Nephilim.
Exactly. The thing that's been proposed is, number one, the sons of God were Seth, the line of Seth, and we disproved that last time because the titles, what the sons of God are, is not men. It's something other than men. Then this time we want to look and say, okay, were these things done by being possessed people, or was it actually angels themselves that came and joined with these women? So I think today would be a good day to kind of look at demon possession in general and see what the Bible has to say and see where we go with possession and kind of study this out.
Is that really in the Bible?
Absolutely. There are several cases of demon possession in the Bible. You'll find a couple that were alluded to in the Old Testament. So at Genesis chapter 6, we see a lot of demon activity involved with mankind, whether it's possession or if it's an angelic intervention or fallen angel, if you will, intervention. And we see that this happened a lot when Jesus came to earth. And it's like every time something major happens, every time we're getting to something important, the demonic world kind of goes crazy and starts manifesting itself. And I believe it says in Matthew chapter 24, 25, that the end days will be just like the days of Noah, which were a demonic highlight. And so I think there are going to be more demonic things happening as we get closer and closer to the rapture and to the end of to the tribulation. And I also think that it's just a clear sign that the demons know that their time is limited. And several times in the Bible, whenever Jesus has talked to demons, they said, "Hey, our time hasn't come." So they know that their time is coming. So I think that we're going to start seeing more demonic things happening now.
I think that that's something I see a lot in media and people talking about it in general. I know that growing up I watched a lot of anime, and that was a very prevalent part of anime was demon this, demon that, he's a demon, she's a demon. And it kind of became a trend to call them fallen angels instead of demons, to kind of humanize them and make them pitiable and make them desirable.
Yeah, and I agree with that. We were talking earlier at how Hollywood and all these entertainment sources, if you will, have taken things that are evil and bad and made them softer. Mm-hmm. So instead of calling it a demon, we call it a fallen angel. Yeah, yes, the demon is a fallen angel, but we need to keep in mind that it's not an angel like when people think of angel. Mm-hmm. And that's another study we ought to do is a study on angels, and we'll get a little bit into that this next week for sure. But yeah, Hollywood has really pushed that along. I can think back when they introduced homosexuality and made it a laughable, funny thing that people accepted that way, and now it's mainstream. Mm-hmm. Homosexuality is perfectly fine now because we accepted it under other terms, if you will. So, but I think a good thing we need to do is look in the Bible at demon possession to figure out, can demon possession cause women to have children that became giants and were powerful men? So the first one I'm going to look at is in Matthew chapter 9. Matthew chapter 9 and verse 32 is where we're going to start. And I'm just going to read a little bit of this. I'm not going to go into real big depth on this. There's so much in here. But it says, "As they went out, behold, they brought to him a dumb man possessed with a devil. And when the devil was cast out, the dumb spake. And the multitudes marveled, saying, It was never so seen in Israel. But the Pharisees, he said, He casteth out the devils through the prince of devils. So here we have a man that's possessed with a devil or a demon, and because of this possession, he's dumb, which means he's mute. He can't speak. So one of the things I'm trying to discern is, if you're possessed with a demon, what control does the demon have over your body? What control does the demon have on you? In this case, this person couldn't speak. Now, we're going to read other cases, and it seems like, and we kind of talked about this before, Matthew just describes exactly what's happened to the person, the result of the possession. We get into Mark, and Mark starts telling us a lot more things that Matthew doesn't say. You know, Mark talks about throwing themselves into fire and throwing themselves into water, trying to kill themselves, and also, you know, cutting themselves with stones and doing all sorts of crazy things. So here in Matthew, we only see one piece. Mm-hmm. We're just seeing that there was a man who had a devil that couldn't speak. Mm-hmm. And, you know, someone would say, well, you know, it could be that he just had a mental problem. Mm-hmm. It may not have been a devil at all, and that's what the world would say. But I noticed that in the Bible here, it says that he casted out the devil. Mm-hmm. Now, Jesus' enemies, the Pharisees and scribes, would have been the first ones to say he didn't cast out a devil if he didn't do that. Yeah. So apparently this person had to have been possessed. Otherwise, the Pharisees would have said, well, this is a lie, this was a scam. But they said, no, he did cast out the devil because he is of the devil, which makes no sense. No. So we can see here that it looks like demon possession can do some physical things to people and make it so they can't talk and we're going to look more and see some more in here, but there's some other physical things a demon can do to people when they possess them. The next one we're going to look at would be in Matthew chapter 17. And this is Matthew chapter 17 and verse 14. Now this one also has another place where you can read about it, but for the sake of time, I just want to read this one here. And it says, And when they were come to the multitude, there came to him a certain man, kneeling down to him, saying, Lord, have mercy on my son, for he is a lunatic and sore vexed. For oftentimes he falleth into fire, and oft into the water. And I brought him to the disciples, and they could not cure him. Jesus said, O faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I suffer you? Bring him hither to me. And Jesus rebuked the devil, and he departed out of him, and the child was cured that very hour. Now, here we have another instance, and we have a person that they're just calling a lunatic. And as you read this account and another account over in Mark, it talks about how he was foaming at the mouth, and he was throwing himself into fire, throwing himself into water, trying to kill himself, trying to do bodily harm. So we can see that demon possession does cause more. It can cause you to do things you don't want to do.
It's causing him anguish and pain, and it says he tore himself going places, and that he was injuring himself physically.
Yeah, and this is the one when Jesus cast the devil out, it rent him, it tore him, and it did some internal damage, and I believe that Jesus healed all that. Yeah. But this again, we see that demons have physical power over their victim, if you will, of their host. And so we can see that possession is a real physical thing that can happen.
Yeah. And that it's, for the most part, detrimental. It's not oh, this makes me hotter, this makes me happier, this makes me better. It's, for the most part, detrimental and it's painful and it's not good.
Yeah, and every time we see it in the scripture, that person has no control over anything. So if this were demon possession back in chapter 6 of Genesis, then those men would not be in control of their own facilities. And one of the things I look at is in the text it says, in the text itself, it says, and the demons or the angels saw that the daughters of man were beautiful and they chose to marry. It doesn't say, and they entered into a man and then married him. It doesn't say that they took over a body and did something. It's just they came straight to the women.
Yeah.
So I think here, if it would be a case of if you were demon possessed, you couldn't control what you were doing, and I think that would be said in the scripture somewhere.
Yes.
But let's look at the second to last one here, and this one I find very interesting, and I have a lot of questions. It's in Mark chapter 5. Mark chapter 5, verse 1, and it goes all the way to 20, but I don't care to read all of that. I just want to read the first few verses here. And it says, and they came over. Now remember, Jesus has just quieted the storm on the sea. And so they're saying, what manner of man is that even the wind and the sea obey him? And they get across the shore, and they land, and it says they came on the other side of the sea into the country of the Gadarenes. And when they were come out of the ship, immediately they were met. Him out of the tombs was a man with an unclean spirit, who had his dwelling among the tombs. And no man could bind him, no, not with chains, because he had been often bound with fetters and chains had been plucked asunder by him, and fetters broken into pieces. Neither could any man tame him. So here, we'll pick up a little bit here. There's something else I want to read in here, but I'm going to talk about what we just saw here. So this is also accounted for in Matthew, and Matthew talks about two men. This is where one of the men came up to Jesus and physically talked to him. Okay? And you'll see where Jesus addresses the demons, and then he casts all the demons into pigs at their request. But what's interesting about this is the demon possession caused the man to be able to pluck asunder the chains that were put on him. Now, I still have an argument on whether or not we're really as technologically advanced as we think we are. We might be computer advanced, but I don't know if we're smarter people and stronger people than we were. I think we're de-evolving rather than evolving. And so I would think that the people that made these chains probably made an okay chain. It's probably not like a necklace chain.
Yeah.
It's probably a real chain. I mean, the Romans were making iron weapons and stuff like that. So they had to be real iron type chains. And I find it interesting that the demon was able to make this guy pluck them asunder, which means to physically, forcibly pull them into pieces. So the question becomes, did the demon give the man supernatural power, or did the demon cause the man to use all of his strength, negating pain and thought and awareness? So here's a good example, and this is, I'm not trying to offend anybody, but normally if you find a person who is a little bit slow, someone who's got some mental problems, they tend to do things at 110% all the time. So you could be roughhousing, or you could be giving somebody a hug, and this person will hug you infinitely harder than other people will, because they don't have the wherewithal to control their strength. So they do everything 110%. And my question is, if I could do things 110%, 100% all the time, how much stronger would I be? A good example is a weightlifter. There have been people that have tried to lift weights and have dislocated their arm, torn stuff in their arms, because what they're doing is they're trying to lift that weight and they're not ignoring pain. I think one that you talked about and was a hernia. So, as you're lifting that weight, your bowels may come out through your stomach wall or down into your scrotum or something, and cause severe problems. But you have pain before that stops you from doing that too much. So did the demon cause the man not to feel pain and go 110% on everything, and maybe he has the strength to do that? I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I think it could be a little bit of both. Because in the previous passages, we see that, or even in this passage and in the last one, we see that the demon has nothing against harming the victim, right?
Right.
They're willing to cut themselves with stones. They're willing to throw into fire and water, all of that stuff. So I don't think it harms the demon to be harming the human.
Right.
Otherwise, why would they be doing all the harmful things, right? So I don't think that they would care if they're tearing like the chains and tearing the arms at the same time. But also, the last one I know we're going to look at shows an ability from the demon being used not by the human, but in the human. So it makes me wonder if it's something that's, since this one isn't going to be a physical one, it makes me wonder if the physical is even possible. Because it doesn't seem like it. It seems like it's probably just using the human strength and not caring about the harm, because we don't have any examples of an inhuman strength being in a human.
Yeah, that's something that I see here is when they're talking about how he's tearing the chains, and even talks about them tearing the fetters. We don't know what that means. We don't know if I watched a guy take a necktie and wrap it around a handcuff and make a loop for his foot, and he was able to pull his hand out of that handcuff. I've seen where you could take and bend links. Men have a lot of power. Yeah. Another thing that we saw, back in my day, there was the Incredible Hulk, was on TV, and they did some research, and they found, with the adrenal gland, if you get adrenaline pumping into the system, a person really has a lot more strength than temporary strength, to do something where people have actually kind of lifted a car or leveraged an impossible amount of weight. So I can see the demon causing those type of reactions that causes the man to be able to do those things.
Yeah, they're already manipulating the soul. Why couldn't they manipulate the body to an extent to be able to cause that reaction? So
the next question would be, can they manipulate the body enough to change the DNA?
See, I don't know.
That's getting into a whole different area. And now we get into the problem that evolution's always had. How do you add information to DNA? So if you're just possessing, and the reason you're talking about possessing versus an actual demon being with a woman is because you don't think the demon has the ability to father anything. So how could the demon add information to the DNA? It really could only take away. It could really only distort. And we were talking about this earlier. DNA has, you have weak traits and strong traits. And, you flip a switch and your eyes are brown. You flip the other way and your eyes are blue. Blue eyes is a recessive gene. Yep. And so the demon maybe could get in there and flip those switches. Maybe, I don't know. But could a demon make you have wings? Well,
Well, we don't have that
we d-
recessive trait. So
we don't have that trait at all. So I don't know how we could have wings, So I don't know that a demon, just looking at this, could manipulate the DNA, because that's what would have to be done.
Yeah.
DNA would have to be manipulated. The last one we'll look at is in Acts 16:16, and it says, "And it came to pass, as we went to prayer, a certain damsel possessed with a spirit of divination met us, which brought her masters much gain by soothsaying." So here we are, we have a girl that's got a spirit of divination, which sounds a little bit different than the other ones. We had a spirit of dumbness, and I think they're just referring to how the spirit acts onto the person. And it says that she was soothsaying, or she was telling the future, and she was bringing prophets to her master. And, this in my opinion, could just be as well as a voice telling the person something. It doesn't have to be that that demon's controlling every aspect of their life. I think of somebody who might say they have a spirit guide or uses a crystal ball or something like that, and they're able to tell things about that person and some stuff that's futurist, if you will. But I don't think that they're changing anything. I don't think that the person has perception of future things. I think the demon's just educating them.
Yeah.
Passing on information.
Yeah, I was going to say, because she also follows Paul and goes, this guy follows God. This guy knows salvation. And so she is accidentally ministering for
Yeah, I
them.
think it became a problem for Paul because he didn't want people to associate her with him. And so he cast out the demon, and of course, that she lost all her powers.
Yeah, and then they got in big trouble. And
So I think we look at this, I think we look at the instance of demon possession in the Bible, and I don't see any evidence that there could be demon possession that changed the offspring
yeah,
of men and women to make them giants, to make them. And when I think of men of old, men of renown, I think like a Hercules and just giant men that were able to do and conquer things, So
yeah, it looks like it's not a physical change. It's
Yeah.
a mental change. And it also doesn't say that,
they're still bound by physics.
yeah, it doesn't say anything about possession. It doesn't say anything about
No.
them being torn up or anything, because all of these people who are possessed were all torn up from harming themselves or not being able to speak or something like that.
It was always a negative thing, and this is spoken into, and they saw the daughters of men were beautiful.
Yeah.
So,
And then the daughters of men also chose to be with them.
yeah.
So why would they choose to be with somebody who is...
Right, throwing themselves in the fire and doing all that stuff. So I think that we ruled out that this is the godly line of Seth.
Yeah.
And we've ruled out this is possession of men. So next we have to figure out how we can prove that angels and human could produce an offspring.
Yeah. And that offspring would be the Nephilim. Because we
Yeah.
have to prove that it really was them in that instance even.
That's for sure.
So look for our next episode where we'll talk about the Nephilim. Finally, we'll get to the Nephilim and why we think that this is angels or fallen angels in Genesis 6.